Steve Harvey try to get Bernie Mac's role on Ocean's 11,
right,
and even try to like undercut him in price and stuff like that? Do you know any?
One of the first things people say is he knew you loved him, and I'm like, that's not really. How do you know that that's true if I didn't tell him?
At 62 years old, D.L. Hughley just said what Hollywood spent 16 years trying to erase: hidden footage, buried tapes, conversations they swore would never see daylight. But why now? Why after all this time? What was on those tapes that made studio execs panic and had Steve Harvey's team calling their lawyers before sunrise? Because according to insiders, this wasn't just about Bernie Mac's death. It was about what he caught on camera before it happened. And if what DL revealed is true, it could blow the lid off one of the biggest cover-ups in comedy history. Buckle up, this one's dark dot, so here's where it all starts. Not in some secret studio basement, not in a smoky Hollywood backroom, but in a hotel suite in Chicago back in 2007. Bernie Mac was already sick, already tired, but according to D.L. Hughley's recent revelation, he was also being watched. Yeah, watched. Not by fans, not by paparazzi, but by people who didn't want him talking. See, Bernie had this old handheld camcorder. Nothing fancy, just a regular black Sony that he carried everywhere. He used to record behind-the-scenes moments, rehearsals, raw conversations with the kings of comedy crew. But according to one of Hughley's longtime producers, those tapes caught a lot more than jokes and tour bloopers. They allegedly caught the politics, the power plays, the betrayals. Rumor is that camera captured Bernie confronting someone, a friend, about undercutting him for the Ocean's 11 role. You know, the same role that was supposedly his intel. Poof, it wasn't. Insiders say the footage got so uncomfortable, it was locked away in a studio vault the same week Bernie was hospitalized. Coincidence? Sure, and I also believe every rapper's retirement announcement. Now here's where D.L. Hughley comes back into the picture. For years, he played the loyal soldier, dodging questions, smiling in interviews and saying, "Nah, man, we were all family." But lately, something's shifted. Maybe age gives you courage. Maybe guilt gets louder than contracts. Because this week, he went live on his radio show and said, quote, "They told me to forget what I saw. They told me the footage didn't exist. But I was there when it got locked up." Wait, what? The footage didn't exist? Then how did he know exactly where it was kept? According to one of his crew members, there were at least 3 hours of raw video, backstage rants, emotional breakdowns, and one alleged moment where Bernie flat out said, "They don't want us owning nothing. They just want us performing." It's chilling, right? Because that line hits harder now than ever. Every comedian from Monique to Cat Williams has echoed the same thing since, and back then, Bernie was basically saying it on camera, years before he was gone. And the kicker? Those tapes were supposedly handed over to a studio representative just 2 weeks before Bernie's death. Since then, never seen again. No leaks, no trace, no nothing. Until now. Because if D.L. Hughley's claims are legit, those same tapes just resurfaced. And what's allegedly on them has people in Hollywood sweating like a politician at a lie detector test. But before we even get to that footage, we need to understand what led to this silence in the first place. Because Bernie Mac didn't just fall out with the industry made sure he stayed out. And it all began with one unspoken rule: you can be talented, but never too powerful. And that's where the real scandal begins. Because right after Bernie Mac started talking about control, about ownership, about respect, his phone calls started getting dropped, meeting invites vanished, projects that were greenlit suddenly went back into development. Classic Hollywood language for "you've been blacklisted." But here's where things get really strange, and this is according to an anonymous production insider who claims to have worked on the Bernie Mac show. She said, "There were moments when the studio would literally call mid-shoot, demanding rewrites that made Bernie look softer, less confrontational. They wanted to polish him because real Bernie made them nervous. Nervous about what? About truth. About a black comedian who wasn't willing to smile for crumbs anymore." Now remember that hidden footage we mentioned? D.L. Hughley claims the footage didn't just show conflict, it showed manipulation. Behind-the-scenes meetings where execs discussed who'd play nice and who'd get phased out. And allegedly, one of those execs, codenamed Mason in leaked production notes, was the same guy who restructured Bernie's TV deal just months before his health collapsed. And get this, that restructuring conveniently stripped Bernie back in profits, merchandising rights, and syndication control. You know, the real money dot according to fake leaked emails obtained by a former studio accountant. Mason wrote, "He's getting too much leverage. We need to keep him happy, but contained. Contained. That's the word that keeps popping up. Contained talent. Meaning, keep them visible enough to make money, but invisible enough to stay quiet. Meanwhile, D.L. Hughley's recent confession has thrown everyone into chaos. Publicists are scrambling. Podcasts are dissecting every syllable. And hashtags like hashtag justice for Bernie Mac and hashtag release the footage are trending across social media. One tweet even claims the footage shows Bernie breaking down after learning his own team sabotaged a film deal. You can hear him saying, "They think I don't know. I don't know." Fake, maybe. Convenient? Definitely not. Because just hours after that tweet went viral, Hughley's radio show upload mysteriously disappeared from YouTube, only to be re-uploaded with one key segment missing, this video, where he mentioned studio pressure. Even more suspicious, Steve Harvey, who's usually loud and opinionated, has gone completely silent on the matter. Not a post, not a comment, not even a half-hearted prayers up for my brother. Radio silence. Now insiders claim one of Harvey's longtime PR reps has been quietly contacting gossip outlets, offering exclusive statements, but only if they agree not to mention the footage. If that's not a cover-up move, I don't know what is. And while the world's still debating whether this footage is real or fabricated, one thing is certain: Hollywood's PR machine is in full damage control mode. Because if that tape drops, it won't just ruin reputations. It'll expose a system that's been operating in the shadows for decades. And according to D.L. Hughley, that's exactly why they're terrified. And now we've reached the point where everything starts collapsing, the fallout. Because once D.L. Hughley dropped that bomb, Hollywood's calm surface cracked like glass. Suddenly, old interviews started resurfacing, cryptic quotes from comedians who once brushed off industry. Rumors now sounded like coded warnings. Cedric the Entertainer's 2009 statement, "Sometimes the truth ain't good for business," is suddenly trending again. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Sources close to Hughley claim he's been getting calls from people telling him to let sleeping dogs lie. That's Hollywood language for shut up or get buried in paperwork. And apparently, it's not just legal pressure. According to fake insiders on Reddit, yeah, those ones who always have a cousin in production, security teams were spotted at Hughley's studio the day after his revelation, allegedly removing external drives and confidential material. Coincidence? Sure. And my neighbor's dog runs TMZ. Meanwhile, fans have gone full detective mode. TikTok clips with millions of views are breaking down DL's statements frame by frame, sensing them with old backstage footage, pointing out facial expressions, lip movements, even pauses. The conclusion? He knows more than he's allowed to say. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. A retired industry fixer, basically a guy whose job was to bury celebrity scandals, just came forward under an alias, claiming that Bernie Mac's tapes weren't destroyed. They were digitized and kept in a private archive controlled by a major network's legal department. And according to him, the footage was quietly reviewed last year during an internal audit. You hearing this? They've been sitting on it, watching, editing, waiting, and what's worse, he claims a second tape exists, one showing a heated argument between Bernie and a comedian turned host, right before Bernie fell ill. The argument? Over loyalty, over playing the game. If that's real, it changes everything. Now, lawyers are reviewing statements, PR teams are spinning narratives, and fans are demanding transparency. But Hollywood doesn't do transparency. Hollywood does damage control. And as we speak, multiple outlets have reportedly received cease and desist warnings for even mentioning hidden footage. Still, Hughley is not backing down. He's hinting that if the full truth doesn't come out soon, he'll name names. His exact words: "I've been loyal long enough." At some point, silence becomes complicity. That one line is shaking the industry. Because if he actually drops details, that means contracts, payoffs, favoritism, everything people whisper about at parties could finally spill into the public eye. So here we are, 16 years later. Bernie's gone, the tapes are missing, and Hollywood's pretending everything's fine. But the internet remembers, and the internet doesn't forgive. Because in the end, the truth always leaks, whether through a hidden camera, a guilty conscience, or a 62-year-old comedian who finally decides he's got nothing left to lose. So now the question is, if the footage is real, why hasn't it been released? What's on those tapes that's got billion-dollar studios sweating bullets and deleting files like it's a clearance sale? Was Bernie Mac silenced for knowing too much, or for daring to say it out loud? Because one thing's clear, D.L. Hughley didn't just speak up, he challenged the silence. And when you do that in Hollywood, people start disappearing from guest lists real fast. But what do you think? Are we finally about to see the truth behind Bernie Mac's death? Or is this another story the industry will bury under red carpets and NDA letters? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk. And hey, if you want more stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this is just getting started.